So 2 years ago, I had this guy on, Christopher Bedford, and he was writing for the Federalist at the time, and he said he had written a piece. I think it was 2 years after the lockdowns. The West troubles aren't ending; they're just beginning. And I thought he had some real foresight, and boy, was he right about that. Christopher Bedford now is a senior editor for politics, Washington correspondent for the Blaze Media. He has written for the American Mind, the Washington Examiner, National Review, the New York Post. He was the editor-in-chief for the Daily Color News Foundation, and we're thrilled to have him at theblaze.com. So help me out on this, Chris, because for the life of me, I cannot get my head around Speaker Johnson being a secret spy. Do you buy this?
Well, not completely, no. And first of all, it's great to be on the pirate ship, especially in these stormy waters. I think it's a great crew to be sailing with. But,
thank you.
Here in D.C., look, an article that caught my eye was a 2018 Daily Beast piece after Johnson became the head of the Republican Study Committee, which was founded as a conservative committee, but was taken over by Republican leadership under Boehner and kind of became a hangout spot for Republicans. That's kind of started the Freedom Caucus. Now, you saw Johnson had been hanging out with the Freedom Caucus. He'd been going to their meetings. He'd not been paying dues, which is a big faux pas. It's hard to collect those dues, but they go to paying the few shared staff the Freedom Caucus has. He'd not been participating, but he'd been going to those meetings. So when he became the new chairman of the Republican Study Committee, a lot of his colleagues, Republican, more liberal colleagues, said, well, this guy's just a double agent. He just sneaked on here. He's pretending to not be part of the Freedom Caucus, the conservative group, but really this is just a conservative takeover. And I looked at that, and I looked at how since he'd become speaker, someone who I had a lot of hope for, you had a lot of hope for,
yeah.
I was excited to see,
Me too.
Wow, this is the first social conservative and Republican leadership in decades who actually cares about this stuff. We might have a fighting chance here. And it's been extremely disappointing. So I think there's some...
That might be an understatement.
Yeah. There's a way that he seems to negotiate, whether it's government funding, impeachment, FISA, now Ukraine. And step one is a major decision comes along his way. And then he goes back and forth. Step two, he's not sure what to do. He delays it as long as he possibly can. Then he tweaks what was originally offered. He pretends that it was a win, and he asks Democrats to bail him out. That seems to be what's going on here. So but when you look back at this Daily Beast piece, and you look back at the people who've known him and have known him to be a good man, which by all accounts he is in his personal life, you have to wonder what could be driving him. And it seems to be kind of a classic case of Washington, D.C. extreme ambition, an ability to deceive himself, which is not too uncommon. You think a lot of the folks here in Washington are real hypocrites or real bad men who claim to be doing the Lord's work when in fact they're just doing their own. But a surprising amount of them have really convinced themselves that they are on the good side, that they are on that really creepy quote, the right side of history, that they are the good guys who are going to come and save the day, and this is why the Lord put them there. And it really feeds into an incredible ego, an incredible amount of ambition, and also just the sad reality that a lot of these folks are pretty weak as leaders and people. They're capable, like many of us are, of standing at the back of the crowd and saying, I agree, this is bad, or being a backbencher who says, I'm not sending any more money to that bloodbath, or I'm going to vote to. I don't care what the defense industry puts on me. I'm not going to let women be drafted. It's easy to say that when you're not the leader. But when you're in the center and you take all those arrows and all those slings and all those scary skiff meetings from the intel community, and it's all on you, you have to answer for that. Well, that's when you find out who's really a leader and who's just ambitious.
There's in your article for Blaze, you've talked to a lot of his colleagues. And one of his senior staffers that worked with him in 2018 said, the speaker is someone who could forgive himself for lying because he thinks it's for a higher purpose. He has an exceptional capacity for self-justification. That's not good.
Something I found. No, it's not good. And it's something that I found repeated over and over again about Johnson. When he ran for speaker as kind of a dark horse surprise candidate, a lot of his colleagues, Republican colleagues, and even the ones who are much more conservative, were willing to say, I know him personally. He's a man of God, and therefore I trust him. But they didn't want to look at the record. They didn't want to look at, well, what happens when leadership puts a little bit of pressure on him? How does his vote change? Will he actually, his personal religious beliefs and his commitments aside, how do those actually shine as a statesman, as someone who's willing to take the arrows for those causes? And they don't. The votes didn't back it up. But he looked at this, as what I've been told by his colleagues, as something that he's been put in this position. He's been chosen for this, and if he needs to lie, if he needs to deceive, if he needs to twist arms to further it, then he is on the right side. That creepy quote that I've heard him saying since, the right side of history, the other people are on the wrong side of history, and that his actions can therefore be justified. I mean, we see this all the time. You see it in levels like this with politics. You see it, of course, a lot since 2016 with a lot of the left saying that people who support Donald Trump are basically the Nazis. Well, once you say that you're on the side of God or they're on the side of Hitler, then you can justify a lot of actions that I think a moral person would not otherwise be able to justify.
So, what do you think's coming for him, for the rest of us? Are we just stuck with a guy who is pathetic and weak now because the Democrats would absolutely vote to keep him in?
I'm curious about that because everyone's on recess right now and things are quieted down. But then the question is, with everything that's coming down next, how is he going to be able to continue to govern here? Right now, he's essentially, even though he's the Speaker of the House and supposedly the head of the Republican coalition, he's really governing as a kind of a prime minister of a center-left coalition, the Uniparty, which has always kind of governed D.C., but now is really being open about it, where he's got half of Republicans on his side and about two-thirds of Democrats on his side. So how is he actually going to be able to pass anything with that coalition? The Democrats will protect him. The Republicans, a lot of them, are never going to come back to him. What's he actually going to be able to do in the next couple of weeks? I kind of wonder if he's a lame duck speaker because he's got these folks, but they've accomplished their $95 billion. Then again, there's already leaked rumors that they're planning the next big handout to the Ukraine war, that they're planning to come in September. And I suspect that he'll still be speaker through September. But what's going to happen in November is either Republicans are going to lose their slim majority, in which case he won't be speaker, or they'll win it. And then he's going to have to look around and find out amongst those liberal Republicans who are his allies, who's actually going to put him up for speaker, and what are the alternatives. Right now, he's kind of running against no one. So he could maintain that, but it will be difficult.
You being in Washington, hanging out or around these people all the time, watching them, listening to them, what do you think they think is coming in November?
I think Republicans are cautiously optimistic for a Donald Trump victory. But of course, there are a huge amount of shenanigans that are already unfolding. There's worries about what's going to be the new COVID, what's going to be the new moral panic that causes it so that voting can't be done squarely and in full view of the public. The Republican National Committee has been trying to mix up its plan for whether it's going to do early voting, where its lawyers are going to be. We know that it's going to be, I think, chaos. Either Donald Trump actually wins and the left wing takes the streets like they did in 2016, burning cars, attacking people, or Donald Trump loses. And either way, I think that large parts of this country are going to not be satisfied with the election results. The tension that existed in 2016 has not gotten any less.
How do the Democrats feel to you? Confident? Worried?
No, they were significantly more worried before Joe Biden's State of the Union. And you saw that in the pages of the New York Times, the Washington Post, MSNBC, people openly wishing that they could have a different candidate. Just like you saw in 2020 with people wishing that it was Cuomo instead of Joe Biden. But Well, and we'll see a lot, actually, this weekend with the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where everyone's going to be paying attention to Joe Biden's remarks. Are they clear? Are they concise? Is he funny like he can be when he's on, like he was at some points of the State of the Union? But there's a real fear amongst Democrats that Donald Trump is coming back, that the constant cycle of drama that they surrounded his entire 4 years with hasn't stuck with the American people because so much of it was fake. So much of it was just impossible to remember because there were fake scandals. Democrats in town are not confident that they'll get the White House, but they are feeling fairly confident about Congress.
We're talking to Christopher Bedford. He is the Blaze senior media political editor and the Blaze Media Washington correspondent. When do they come back into session?
Next week. Short vacation, and the Senate was even cut down a little shorter because they had to stick around to do the American people's business. And I'm being sarcastic on that. They spent $95 billion abroad.
Real quick, any thoughts on the Trump trial this week? Biden said, the DOJ said actually, that Trump is the first president to face criminal prosecution because other presidents just didn't commit any crimes.
Yeah, I remember when Barack Obama left office, the Washington Post said it was a scandal-free administration.
Yeah, totally.
Well, I think there were some dead border agents who could disagree with that. The Trump trial is going to be interesting. It's at New York. It's tough. The judge is obviously against him, but the prosecution has embarrassed itself so far. The case is so weak that, and you kind of forget that in the hubbub of all the news, that it's relying on a bunch of liars to turn a misdemeanor that is outside of the statute of limitations into a felony because of another misdemeanor that can barely be cited. And it took the prosecution 2 days even to come up with that argument. And at the same time, the Supreme Court seems like it's going to crack down and at least limit what the president is able to do with his authority. So that will help push some of the other trials back to after the election if that happens. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if Trump's in a prison cell or not because he's not out campaigning. He's not able to leave New York. He's kind of stuck. He wasn't able to weigh in these last Capitol Hill fights. They haven't put him in a prison cell, but they somewhat put him in a room, and that's something that you'll see, and you'll probably see some jokes about it. That this big fancy dinner they're having this weekend, they'll be laughing at us about how they still managed to stop probably the greatest campaigner in modern history from being able to campaign.
So do you think that hurts him? I mean, because the people who are going to vote for him are going to vote for him anyway. And the ones who, really, they'd vote for him, but they really don't like his tweets and his personality and everything else. By keeping him off the road and yet still in the public eye, you keep the focus on Joe Biden. And is there any case to be made that's good for Donald Trump?
So far, it actually hasn't hurt him, exactly to your point. And the folks in the suburbs who maybe voted for Trump in 2016 and voted for Biden in 2020, to your point, they're not going to be swayed by a rally. They're not going to be swayed by the kind of popcorn and rah-rah that goes on at those fun events. But they are being swayed a little bit by the incredible unfairness. The question is whether or not they're going to be able to actually get felony charges on him, because that's the kind of thing that does spook those easily frightened voters.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it, Chris. Thank you.
It's great to be back.
You bet.